when you were down south, it was country music, or it was country music, or it was country music, whichever you wanted, you know. Truck in 47. Times were good, life was fun. Kept them 18 wheels rolling. Break of day till the setting sun. I am Charlie McGee, and I was born under a rock in Madison County, North Carolina, which is in the middle of nowhere. And I lived there up until I could get away and finish high school. And then I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and went to the University of Tennessee. And after that, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and spent a year, actually 2 years in Atlanta, and then moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and spent most of my working career in this area, with the exception of about 6 years in Southern California, where I worked in the ports in LA and Long Beach, and then moved back to the Carolinas after we sold our company out there. And so I've been here ever since. Madison County, North Carolina, in the middle of nowhere, it was difficult to pick up radio stations, period. And we didn't have a television, so it was radio. And during the daytime, you could only get two stations. One of them was a station out of Asheville, North Carolina. The other one was a local station out of Marshall, North Carolina. And they both played country music. At night, the whole world opened up to us, because you could pick up when they increased the bandwidth and the broadcasting power for the major, at that time, AM stations. You couldn't get FM in those days. I don't think FM existed in those days. But at any rate, you would pick up WSM in Nashville, Tennessee. You could pick up WLAC in Chicago. You could pick up 3WE in Cleveland. And you could pick up, I can't remember the call letters for the one in New Orleans, but you could pick up one in New Orleans. So I think the hour was 8 o'clock when they increased the broadcast power of those stations. So, I would stay up late listening to music on my little radio in the bed when I was, falling asleep. And if you tuned into the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night from WSM in Nashville, you could hear all the current, at that time, the current players that were playing country music on the Grand Ole Opry. I got a feeling called the blues. My baby said goodbye. People like Hank Williams Sr. was really popular, and my mother especially loved his music. And but just the old time country music, people like Hank Snow and Earl Haggard came in a little bit later, so did Willie Nelson, some of those guys. But I remember mostly Hank Williams Sr., because that was a lot of the music that got played around our house. And when I grew up, there was, we listened to both kinds of music, but we listened to country and Western. But it was a time really when I guess rock and roll was being introduced more so, because back in the early 50s and in the early 60s, rock and roll really only got its real start in the 60s, okay? But before that, most of the music that was listened to in the South was pure country music, Now, if you take an analogy of the like Bob Dylan era and that kind of music, that was not as popular when I was young as it later became, because it was really looked upon as protest music for the Vietnam War. People in the South were hardcore believers in the military, and they didn't really take too well to the protest songs. In the area where I grew up, you were either a patriot or not. In the eyes of the people from the South, the people that were against the war were, in the eyes of the South, again, they were the people from the big cities that had a lot of money, and they were rich kids that didn't feel like they ought to go fight. When I get in the rocky fields, I'll sit down and cry. Of course, music was a part of mountain life anyway. Some people would play a banjo, some people would play a guitar, and some people would play a washboard. But everybody had to kind of make their own music, because that was the highlight of our entertainment when I was growing up. We didn't have any fiddle players in our little group, so that was a mainstay for country music out with fiddle and of course steel guitar. We didn't have any steel guitars. It was basically guitars and mainly just a rhythm and a lead guitar player would play, and then whoever else joined in, just joined in as also rhythm playing guitar. Mainly guitars is what it was all about. We had some really good banjo pickers in our neighborhood, and they would play and come in and play with us and on the back porch and stuff. And of course, when they were playing the banjo, it was always something like Blue Moon of Kentucky or something like that.
Remember, you've told me that you played with Doc Watson.
He used to have a jam session it wasn't every weekend and all that stuff, but he used to have a jam session that he would coordinate over in a little area called Little Switzerland, which is between Asheville and Marion, North Carolina, in the mountains. And I did have the opportunity to sit in on one of those jam sessions with him over there, and that was cool because he was one talented dude, man. I can't remember exactly. I think I was about 8 years old. My first cousin, Ruby Higgins, who lives in Virginia, actually gave me my first guitar. Okay. And it was an old Stella guitar. It's a miniature guitar. And that was my very first guitar. And I had to glue part of it back together to keep it together in the early days, and then eventually I have put some new keys on it because the keys that were on it actually dry rotted, and a new bridge on it and a lot of other stuff. But I still have that guitar, and so that was kind of my first introduction to music. We had a music teacher at elementary school at Ebbs Chapel Elementary in Madison County, and her name was Mrs. Robinson, Gretchen Robinson, and she actually agreed to teach us for free, me and our some friends of ours, and so we started a little band, and she kind of coached our band, and she didn't charge us for anything, and of course we learned a little bit before then just by being around other people that played on the back porch. Our basics was country music, people like Conway Twitty and Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings and those guys. But we also played some pop music, and we did some of the Three Dog Night stuff, and we did a little bit of the Bob Dylan stuff, which is I guess folk music more than anything else during those days. And we played in church. Unlike today, there's a lot of music that's created by the artists that perform, the local artists that perform. In those days, it was pretty much all the songs out of the church hymnal, and so you would pick a song like Amazing Grace, something like that out of a church hymnal, and that would be something you'd play, and you'd play only every Sunday. You'd play only a couple of songs. It wasn't like you had a whole session like a lot of churches do today, but it was kind of unusual in those days for a band to actually go and play in church. So we were a little bit unique in that regard. Our band was called the Carolina Mill Wheels. In the band, I played bass guitar and tried my best to sing. I'm not a very good singer, but I would do my best. And we had, a drummer who started out being my cousin, and then later on was just a friend of ours named Johnny Bailey that played drums for us. And we had a rhythm guitar player, Dennis Thomas, and then the lead guitar was my fourth cousin, Randy Blankenship. And our piano player was Mary Ellen Davis, and she probably took the music thing early on as far as anybody, and she cut a few records on her own and tried to make it big in the music scene. It never really got big, but she did her best, and some of her records played on some of the local stations up in Asheville, stuff like that. I'm sure I've told you the story. One of the things, and one of the still today popular singers is Dolly Parton. And Dolly Parton got her start on a show in Knoxville, Tennessee called the Kaz Walker Talent Parade.
Now here's our youngest singing sensation here on the Kaz Walker program, little Dolly Parton. Dolly.
that's where she was recognized by a singer named Porter Wagner, and then Porter Wagner took her under his wing and kind of took advantage of her, and he also promoted her and helped her get where she is today. So we weren't that far from Knoxville, and our piano player and lead singer Mary Ellen Davis, her brother lived in Knoxville. His name was Frank, and Frank made arrangements for our little band to go participate in that same talent show in Knoxville on TV. The way it worked was that the way you either won or didn't win was when people went to shop for their groceries. And Cas Walker, it wasn't just one store. They were like a local chain in Knoxville that had like maybe 10 or 12 grocery stores. And when you went to shop at your grocery store, you would vote for whoever you thought ought to win the talent show from the week before. So, not being the fact that we weren't from Knoxville or anywhere near Knoxville, we were close to 100 miles away. We didn't win, but we got a lot of votes, but it was a good experience for us, and we got to be on TV, so that was pretty cool. I've written, I don't know, I forget now, 7 or 8 songs, I guess, something like that. I was in the trucking industry for a long time, but mostly the international transportation industry, but early on the trucking industry. And when they deregulated the trucking industry in 1980. It was called the Motor Carrier Act of 1980. It really turned the industry on its head. And it was some hard times for a lot of people during that time who were in the trucking business. And so I wrote the song, and it was, I've been playing it for people on my guitar for a lot of years. And every time I play it, somebody said, "Hey, man, you ought to do something with that." I said, "Yeah, eventually I will." So I finally did. I took it to Nashville, and again, I'm not that great a singer, so I got the music studio who is Baird Studios in Nashville, and so they brought in a studio musician. Adam Cunningham is his name, and he's actually doing the vocals on my song, and that's the one that he did.
Going back home to warmer weather, where there's blue skies and some
sun. A nice high quality recording that he did, but he still doesn't sing it as well as you do, of course.
Well, I mean, there's a history behind it when I sing it, and when somebody outside sings it, it's just a song, right? Now they're calling those the good times. Life ain't simple anymore. Turn my wheels. Just remember one thing: no matter where you go, there you are. I got nothing left to show, and they say good times are coming. They're just around the bend. Ain't got time to wait for good times. Out my rig before then. Trade my truck for 48 cars. Wife and kids to call. No, you can't make money farming, but at least I'd be at home. And they say good times are coming. They're just around the bend. Ain't got time to wait for time. I have my rig before then. And they say good times are coming. They're just around the bend.